Hey there. If you're a frequent listener to our show, you already know that our show is brought to you by our friends over at Artillery Sports. But what you may not know is that Artillery Sports helps athletes of all types win on and off the course and court. They do this by selling quality, durable, and precision manufactured sports equipment that keeps you in the game, while also using a portion of the profits to provide the funding needed to care for our nation's veterans. With Artillery Sports, it's more than just a game. So head over to artillerysports.com today to buy the quality equipment you need to keep you in the game and to help our nation's veterans at the same time. That's artillerysports.com. Make sure you head on over there today. Oh, and use the code DOCFIRST to get 10% off your first order. Welcome to Documentary First, an inside look at documentary filmmaking. I'm your host, Christian Taylor, and a documentary filmmaker myself. Today, I am joined with a documentary filmmaker and Mount Everest summiteer, or is it summiter? I don't know. Alex Harz. Welcome, Alex. How is it? What's it called? Mount Everest?
Both is fine. Summiteer and summiter, and I use both. So it really
Okay.
depends. I don't think there's an actual, like a Webster, standard on this. So we'll go with whatever you like, Christian.
Yeah, I've heard it, I think, pronounced summiteer. It kind of sounds, I'm, been spent so much time in France. Summiteer sounds much more appropriate, I think. Anyway, Happy New Year to you. We're at
Happy
the
New Year
beginning of
too.
2025. I think it's just so exciting to look ahead to this open road of 2025. It kind of like this blank slate and feels like climbing Mount Everest sometimes, though, this
Isn't
whole
that the
new
truth?
year
Yeah.
all ahead of us. And
Expectations and things you don't know that are going to happen. So it's a lot of, I guess, wondering and waiting to see how the year rolls out.
yeah, super exciting though. I love the beginning of January. It sort of offsets the cold of this Chicago winter that I absolutely hate. So I'm going to focus on the blank slate of wonderfulness. All right, let's dive into today's episode. I'm super excited about this. I'm going to introduce Alex a little bit, and then Alex, we're going to just get to know you beyond this bio. But let me start by reading this. Okay, this is Alex Harz, and he loves using his production and directing, acting, and diverse international business experience for creative-based projects. He is a Mount Everest summiteer, member of the prestigious Explorers Club, founder of the Win Improv Comedy Radio Show, and the creator host of the Quest 2D and virtual reality documentary series, a unique new series designed to take global audiences on an epic educational thrill ride to reveal amazing, rarely seen stories from some of the most captivating places on Earth. The Quest 2D and virtual reality documentary series. I mean, that just sounds amazing. I don't even know what it means, but I can't wait to hear all about that. So, of course, I understand the 2D part of it, but how you have a virtual reality documentary series, I'm not so sure about that. But don't tell me yet. I want to get to know you first.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised. I know that because I watched it, this documentary kind of starts with you as a kid. So let's start with you as a kid. Where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in Malaga, Spain, actually.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. My parents moved down there. My dad's German, and my mom's an English school teacher from the United States. Matter of fact, in the Midwest, not far outside of Chicago area. And she went over to Germany to teach a bunch of little German kids English. And the first apartment she lived in, which happened to be an apartment building that my father built, was hers. They met. They moved to Spain,
That's cool.
had my brother and I, and then we moved back to Germany and lived in Germany early part of my life before coming to the United States, and we moved to the
That's
Midwest.
why you know German.
That's right. That's why I know German.
That's another piece of the puzzle because, yes, you did speak a little German in this film.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And so actually, technically, it's my first language is German. So, but my mom being an English school teacher, and my dad being 100% German, I was kind of being spoken to in both languages at a young age. So I think that's probably
great.
what is eliminating my accent when I speak English, and when I'm in Germany speaking German, I don't sound like an American either. So
yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so you were born in Spain, then eventually you moved back to the U.S.
Yeah, that's right.
And you lived
in Omaha, Nebraska.
Nebraska. Now, what age was this?
Oh, God, I was almost between 6 and 7 is when we came over. Yeah.
All right, and then talk to me about what happened then. Apparently, you stayed here the rest of your life.
I did. I would spend most of my summers back in Germany with my German side of the family. So my parents would throw me on a plane, take me to Chicago O'Hare, and the next stop, Frankfurt, Germany. And then 2.5 months later, or 2 months later, I'd be back in the United States when the school year started. So,
Pretty cool.
my childhood was a little bit different that way, and then, of course, I played a lot of soccer, which is huge in Germany. And so that's kind of what I did growing up, was play soccer every day. And ironically, coming back from a soccer practice, 2 to 3 hour soccer practice in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm sitting on my couch at 14 years old, drinking some soda, having some chips, and I saw something.
Exactly what you're supposed to have after soccer
Exactly.
practice, obviously.
I mean, and the nutrition standards are a little bit different, or the understanding of them are a little different, but high metabolism, working out every day. I did okay, probably burning that off. But I saw something on TV about Mount Everest, and I said, one day I'm going to climb that mountain.
Wow.
Out of
Wow.
sight, out of mind for many years, until I'm sitting on the couch in Denver, Colorado, watching random daytime television. I mean, Christian, random daytime television,
And how
nothing
old were
different.
you at this time?
Oh God, I must have been, let's see, that process, 9 years. Oh God, I would have been 30, late 20s, something like that. And I'm
Yeah.
watching something randomly on television. It might have been Ellen DeGeneres. It could have been anything, and then all of a sudden that recollection popped back in my head. Alex, you promised yourself one day you're going to climb Mount Everest.
Like 15 years later.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was going to do, but the next day I started, because I realized if I couldn't keep a promise to myself, how can I honor my commitments to anyone else? And that long, arduous process of training and learning how to climb mountains and making a bunch of mistakes, and then going to climb the highest mountain in South America, going to Denali and climb the highest mountain in North America, and so on. That whole process started. And then I had this aha moment on the summit of Denali at 11:30 at night, under that perpetual Alaskan summer sun, by myself with my climbing partner, staring out of the beautiful Alaska range. I said, you know what? I can't continue this process of trying to fulfill a childhood, commitment to myself, just to stand here to see the most beautiful view in front of my eyes for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it might be. I have to do it for a greater reason. And that's how the Quest series started. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. I love that. I love the why about how, film projects started, especially documentaries. It's
Right.
just it's the same. I mean, for me, it is why I love documentaries, because they do cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time. I feel
Mhm.
like if there isn't a genuine why behind them, why do them?
Yeah, absolutely right.
So that's beautiful to hear the why behind yours. Now, you were, late 20s when you remember this. What were you doing at the time? Obviously, you weren't just sitting around eating nachos or, drinking Mountain Dew when you're that age. What were you doing?
Yeah, I was doing film stuff actually too. So at that time I was doing dark comedy work, and also improv comedy. So that's one of my big passions as well, is that really off the wall kind of comedy stuff. Make fun of everything you possibly can, in order to eliminate the stigma of those things. So yeah, I was doing that, and doing commercials, doing everything that had to do with film and acting at that time. And so then it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna start getting into the mountaineering side. I think I was a traditional athlete. I played college sports, but I never was into rock climbing, mountaineering. Even though I was living in Colorado, I was skiing and snowboarding, doing those kind of things, but never thought about climbing rock, or, being stupid and grabbing an ice axe in January and going to a 14,000-foot peak. I mean, that just made no sense. But I knew that that was the process I had to undergo in order to get where I ultimately promised myself I would get to. And
Yeah.
so then I got into the whole, mountaineering, glacial travel, wilderness survival, lead climbing, trad rock climbing, all the different things that it takes to have those skills to go to a place like Everest and the other mountains that I climbed, and started that long, long process. It took about a decade or more before I got to Everest. So it was a long process. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Now, my question is, you then, like you said, I needed to do this for a greater purpose. Now we know that you've created this into a documentary and a virtual reality documentary series. So, you had to have some sort of background and training. So, talk to me about where this training came from. Or, like, I mean, I say that, and yet I had zero training and decided, how hard can a documentary be
Yeah,
to
right.
make, and just did it. So, did you have any training?
It originally started with short films. I was making short films at the University of Colorado with a friend of mine, and him and I were discussing about going to CU Film School. And actually, the ironic thing was the director of the film school said, "Well, what do you want to do? What do you want to be grip? Do you want to be a writer? Do you want to be a DP? What is it that you're interested in? And so we actually want to produce, the movies from beginning to end. And he goes, well, if you actually want to make movies, don't go to film school, go to business school.
Yes.
And so
That's awesome.
I actually got an international business and organization communication degree while at the same time making short films, because of our passion, but not looking at it as, oh, this is going to be our direct career path. And then what happened was my buddy was working in advertising at one of the newspapers down here in Denver, and I was doing, IP stuff, internet, intellectual property stuff, and internet IP stuff. So, one day we sat down and said, look, we talked about making a feature film. We're not getting any younger. When are we going to do this thing? We said, let's do it now. We both quit our jobs. Well, how are we going to pay the bills? Well, we started bartending. And so that's how we, kind of made the day-to-day living happen to start the 4-year process of making a dark comedy at that time from beginning to end. At least in those days, it took about 4 years to make a movie, hence why the credit roll is so long. And that's how the film
And
work
where
started.
is that film now?
That was here in Colorado. We shot over the course of 36
and is it on? Can we see that anywhere?
Yeah, you can still see it. It's on Amazon. You can see it on Amazon.
What's it called?
It's called American Dream.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a dark comedy. And the interesting thing about that movie is if you watch that movie and then you watch the Quest Everest, there's like, what, is this the same person? Yeah, far removed, in amount of years in between, but yeah. It's the same person.
That's awesome. Well, I just think that's so fascinating, your journey. And I want people to just stop and listen. And I want to highlight what that director of that film school said, because it's what I've been preaching forever. I now have been sort of in this business for a really long time, and I've watched a lot of filmmakers and actors and photographers and so many different artists kind of come and go in this business. And the ones that really end up making it in this business are the ones that have some sort of business mindset, business background, business training. Because if you don't understand that your art, that you have, in order to make a living, you have to treat it as a business. You're not going to make anything, you're not going to make anything with your art. So going to business school and then on the side, continuing to practice your art, I think was genius advice. So, and then, taking that risk to quit your good paying jobs and bartending and having a day job. And, because that's a risky, scary thing to do. But I mean, that's what I counsel people all the time to do. Just make money, do that while you're doing your art and what you want to do. And, just keep socking away that money. Really, that's what you got to do. If that's your passion and that's what you want to do, keep hammering away at that. So good for you for doing that.
Well, that's spot on, Christian. You're absolutely right, because I think you only have one crack at this. You have one chance at life, so be passionate about it. There's 1,000 ways to monetize life, but at the end of the day, are you satisfied with life? And so if you have the passion, the dedication, and you have the drive and a little half the sense of how to try to figure this all out, you can make it happen if you stick with it. Now, of course, it can be a very, very long process, but at the end of the day, would you rather wake up at 65 and drink Jack Daniels all day because you're depressed because you never went and climbed Mount Everest or whatever that you promised yourself you're going to do? Or would you say, you know what, at least I gave it my best chance?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's go back to you being on Mount Denali, and you're like, if I'm going to do this, there has to be a why. So what was your why?
Well, I sat there and I said, okay, well, I had some filmmaking experience, obviously, at that point in time. I have a lot of international business experience at that point in time, but there's a lot of risk with regards not just the time, the training, you're risking your life, setting aside months, out of the year just to dedicate to climb mountains. I said, you know what? I can't just do it for my own personal self or satisfaction, even though this is a dream that I have to try to achieve, or at least give the best chance of it. I want the rest of the world to experience this with me, because I'm taking the risk to do it. Why not use my skills in business and filmmaking to let people go along this journey and see what it's like to do these things and to climb Mount Everest, for example, where I ultimately ended up, because I knew that 99.9% of the people on the planet will never have that opportunity or have that desire to do that, because again, it's not the easiest thing in the world, and the biggest limiting factor to do a documentary on Everest is actually be able to climb the mountain, and that eliminates 99% of the people on this planet, unfortunately. So so that's why I did it, was to turn this into a story and an ongoing series, so people can go along to these exotic places that they might not have an opportunity to visit themselves, and to experience what it can be like through the story of a lens.
Yeah. And so for me, one of the most important things about any documentary, and it's true for narrative too, but what is most compelling, I think, for the best art is story. And I think what you did with your film and what keeps people interested is the story. So we talked earlier before we hopped on here about, I asked you, what is it that you really care to talk about? I always want to ask filmmakers, what do you want me to ask you? And you told me that there's something really close to your heart and something you're passionate about. And so I'm going to let you describe that. What is it that, why did you make this? What do you hope people walk away from? Is it that, it's this, you want them to look at how great this mountain climbing is and how scary it is? And, what is it that you want us to learn when we leave the theater?
Yeah, that's exactly none of that. It's interesting because there's quite a few Everest films out there, and they're all very good in their own right. The last thing I wanted to be was a movie about myself. Look how cool I am! I'm climbing Red Bull, Red Bull style Everest movie. I didn't want that. I just wanted to be the conduit of information to the mountain, and more importantly, the backstory of the mountain and the country of Nepal. Because most people, especially in the West and the United States, they couldn't even tell you where Nepal is on the map, let alone know anything about the country. Yeah, okay, if you're into Marvel, you've seen Doctor Strange, and there's these scenes of them running through Kathmandu. Okay, and then of course, since 1953, since the first time Everest was climbed, you know, Mount Everest put Nepal on the map on an international perspective. So I wanted people to know, well, what's the culture like? What religions did they follow? What are the Sherpa people like? What's the backstory historically about Everest, and how does it work economically and environmentally, and all the different things that Everest has an impact directly on the country of Nepal and the image that the mountain is to the country itself. And so that's what I really wanted to dig deeper about, because that's what you don't see in Everest movies is, the why, the backstory of what it all means, what Mount Everest really comprehensively is all about. And that's what I wanted people to really take away from this film. And so far, that's exactly what I'm getting. And I'm again, humbly honored that that's the case. Yeah, I mean, the drone shots and the climbing and all that stuff is very, very cool. And what it takes to climb Everest over the course of 52 days, because a lot of people think, oh, it just takes a week or a couple of days. No, it takes 2 months to climb Everest. A lot of people don't even know that, even if they've seen Everest movies. So we go through that whole process of what it takes to climb the mountain. But more importantly, what is life like for the Sherpa people? What is the religious significance of
Well,
Everest to the people, and
yeah,
so
I
on?
mean, I don't know that people know that there's quote unquote a Sherpa people. Like, now that
Yeah.
was new to me in your documentary. We talk. I actually joke all the time that, like, Heidi Kender is my, she's my one of my the producer of this podcast, actually, but she also goes with me whenever I have events, and I call her lovingly my Sherpa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I always thought that was the definition of just someone who carries all your shit.
Yeah.
But and it is, but they actually are a people
Yep.
that, and they have a language,
Yep.
and they live in Nepal.
Yep.
And your movie taught me that.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's because Sherpa has been that ubiquitous term about, oh, porters that are high altitude specialists because of their genetic ability to do so, to carry, gear. Well, yeah, that's true. But the backstory is no, they're actually, an ethnic group of people that fled China about 640 years ago because of religious persecution. They ended up over the Himalayan pass, and there they ended in the Khumbu Valley. They wanted a, serene valley where they could be safe and, protected to live their way of life. And then fast forward years later to the modern time, well, they just happen to be genetically disposed to high altitude and to be, some of the best people on the planet to deal with altitudes that Mount Everest take you to, which is 29,032 feet. So
Yeah. Yeah, that I think you did a great job of introducing us to more than just the mountain and just the mountain climbing. And I did learn a lot about the people and the culture and different areas. I also really enjoyed learning about the different levels
mm,
because, you really usually just skip from the bottom to base camp, and then, maybe a few levels, and then the mountain,
mm,
then the point. But so I did like to learn about all the way up. That was really cool. But I have to tell you, the first thing that I really, and I told you this offline too, the first thing that I really, really felt like
mhm.
that gave me a major jolt was when we got to the ice fall, which is like what you have to go through in order to get to the peak. I was like, I'm sorry. I actually almost wanted to stop watching your documentary because it was too scary for me to look down. And the reason I'm talking about it is not just because of that. It's because of the filmmaking aspect. That's where I also stopped and I was like, okay, I mean, as a person watching this, I don't even want to watch it, much less would I ever go across it. And then now somebody's filming this. And so that really drew attention to me of the filmmaking aspect of it. I've thought about it a little bit before, become aware of just, how difficult it would be to film all of this. But in that moment, I was really aware of how challenging the filming must have been. So, A, explain the ice fall. B, then talk about the filming and how challenging it was to film this documentary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the ice fall is a unique place. It's the highest glacier in the world, and base camp sits at the base of that ice fall on top of the highest glacier in the world, which moves between 3 to 6 feet a day downhill. So base camp's constantly shifting downhill, but more importantly, how that affects the climbing is that the crevasses get wider as the days go on. The big seracs, which are blocks of ice that are the size of houses and buildings, will just collapse and tumble over. So it's like a bunch of Jenga blocks constantly. And then you have avalanches because the mountain, the ice falls surrounded in a valley by two big mountains on each side that they're constantly sloughing off snow. And so you have avalanches that hit the ice fall too. So you have the exposure of falling into a crevasse because all of a sudden your ladder might punch through because the crevasse has gotten wider, or the safety ropes haven't anchored the ladders in place because of the movement of that ladder getting pulled apart like this, or you have the blocks of ice that are falling over, like Jenga, or you have the avalanches that come hit you at any point in time. So these are the dangers you have to deal with just to try to get through the ice fall. But if you want to make it to the top of Everest from the Nepal side, you have to go through that ice fall. And so it's so unique because there's no other place in the world where you climb a mountain like that. You would never go through an ice fall like that nowhere else in the world in order to try to make it to the top of the mountain, except for on Everest, because you want to get to the top of the highest mountain on earth. So that was the difficulty of climbing that mountain from the standpoint right in the beginning. I saw every movie about Everest. I've read everything about Everest. I've been passionate about Everest since I was a kid. But as soon as I got on that ice fall, you can just throw it all out the window. It's literally Russian roulette. You have one bullet in the chamber and you spin it and you hope it's not your day. And so every time you go through it, and you have to go through it multiple times in order to climb to the top of the mountain, you have to go up, come back down, move your
Yeah, see,
gear.
that's the thing. It's not just once.
Yeah.
It is not just once. It's like several times
Yeah.
in order to get to the top. And
That's right.
I mean, I may be able to make it over once, but I mean, it's like something that you just have to constantly face every single time if you're actually going to get to the top.
That's right.
How
And
many times have you been over the ice fall?
8 times. So
Oh
I
my
went through the
gosh.
ice fall 8 times, and so then filming it, of course, obviously lends its challenges because it's so cold. It can be brutally cold. Your batteries freeze, your lenses fog up. You got to make sure that the equipment's going to work. You know that by the time you turn the camera on, you're down to about maybe 25 to 45% battery capacity of what the battery life is supposed to be because of how cold the weather is. And then you say, okay, and then you can't stage any of the shots, right? So you're trying to climb, which is extremely hard, and at the same time try to film. And then you're tethered to a rope for safety reasons and so on. So yeah, I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, it was extremely challenging, but there was one positive on this. And that was because I'm so focused on trying to get the footage, I was a little bit numb to some of the danger around me. Like I said, the avalanches, the Serac collapses, the crevasses that are 1,000 feet deep that you have to walk across Home Depot ladders with only this much purchase on the front of your feet, which are the crampons, the spikes on the bottom of your boots, and that much on the back of your feet. So you're literally just tiptoeing, trying to place your feet on these ladder points that are aluminum, and hopefully that holds your feet. And so those are the things that not only scare you, but also on the same token is a difficult, challenging physical aspect of the climb. But me having to film that in VR and also in 2D gave me that sense of false security, almost like a war reporter. That's sitting in a war scene, just watching combatants fight. Bullets are flying by. They don't think at all about them being casualties in this confrontation because they think they're not part of the confrontation. Well, again, stray random shots don't care. Just like a drive-by shooting, people are getting hit all the time that weren't the people that were the focus of the shots, right? That's the same thing. So it could have got me killed, but on the same token, it also took away that fear of what was going on in front of me because I was hyper focused at the job at hand.
Yeah, well, were you holding a camera or was it like stuck on your head
It
or
depends on the scenario. So the VR camera I had on the corner of my right shoulder. So you're actually climbing with me in first person, like a video game, like a first person shooter. So it's the only first person virtual reality ascent of Mount Everest in the whole world. And, it's a documentary. So you're climbing with me all the way to the top and so on. Then the 2D cameras, up to base camp, we had 9 cameras. But then that crew that filmed all the stuff down in Kathmandu and all the cameras that we had, and then the 9-day trek, it takes 9 days to get to base camp just to trek there. That started dwindling as the higher we went because, again, the biggest limiting factor of being able to do the documentaries, being able to climb the mountain. So that we sent our crew back. One of our crew guy got altitude sickness. He had to get helicopter evacuated from base camp because the base camp is 17,500 feet. So that's the starting point, for the base of the mountain itself. So that's higher than any civilization on this planet. So you can't stay there indefinitely anyway. There's never been a civilization that's lived above 17,000 feet because you can't survive there indefinitely. You will eventually die. So you're just cheating death. The higher you go on the mountain, it's the quicker the clock goes for how long you can stay there. So, that was a difficult thing. And so for filming in those environments, again, is not easy. And that unfortunately eliminates most people that want to do something like this. So then we knew that, okay, who's actually going to hold the 2D cameras? I knew I was going to film the thing in VR with a fixed position most of the time, climbing with me. So I only had to, well, not only, but I always had to check the battery. I had to check the focus, that the stick didn't fall over, and all this other kind of stuff that happens while you're climbing. But at least I wasn't manning that the full time. But then when I was climbing in the 2D side of things, I got the GoPro with the gimbal. I've got a regular camera that I'm filming. Then I'm going with a Jumar, which is this device that's connected to the rope that clips you into the mountain so you don't fall off of it, or hopefully not into a crevasse. So you're moving it like that, and
hopefully
I'm
not?
filming to try to go across the ladders, or depending on what I'm doing. There's different objective dangers depending on where you are on the mountain. So yeah, I'm doing a little bit of both. It's almost like climbing a tree with a camera in your hand, or on a jungle gym with a camera in your hand, trying to tell the story too.
That's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. I mean, it's hard enough to film a movie. So, I mean, did you have anybody spotting you? Because, even when you're filming in real life on the ground and you're moving backwards or you're kind of moving blindly, it's really important to have spotters so you don't trip over
No, it's
something.
just me. It's just me. And so now we had shots. For example, we had 2 other guys that were filming the expedition leader. The guy was actually the expedition leader up the mountain, and the head Sherpa, who was my climbing partner and became a brother from another mother father, as he calls me to this day. He also I gave him a camera too. So there were situations, as you see in the film, where you see me, of course, because otherwise it'd all be POV stuff, right? No, so there are shots where we have, okay, Kashi would film me or Ryan would film me and so on. But with regards to the filming I was doing, no, I had no one spotting me. I had to climb and
And
film on my own.
what cameras did you use?
Oh, it depends. So we had a Canon camera that we used, and we had GoPro cameras, and then we had the VR camera itself. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's just insane to me that you really could manage both of those. Now, when did you start filming this? I asked you earlier. This to me is pretty crazy because I did not expect this answer.
Well, yeah. So the films are composed of essentially 5 seasons. So footage from 2014, 2015, 2018, 2021, and 2022.
Yeah.
And so we take footage from all those climbing seasons and we put that together to make the Quest Everest 97-minute documentary. And then the VR film comes actually from 2018. And again, the reason for that is by the time we came back with the 63 hours footage and cataloging it all and so on, now we're into, the start of 2019. Well, then something happened towards the middle part of 2019 or the end of it, and that was COVID. And then that shut everything down for about 2.5 years. And then we had to ramp it back up, finish the editing, get it out into the distribution channels. And here we are.
Well, the reason I didn't expect that answer is because when I watched the film, it did not come across that it was
Mhm.
shot in, over that course of time. It
Yep.
seemed like it was all shot during a 2-month period of
Yep.
time as
Yep.
you were climbing to Mount Everest. So kudos to you for that. How difficult was it, to take that 63 hours of footage that was not shot at one time and edit it down into a 90-minute story?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, that's just the cataloging alone, just the title, everything. I'm very anal when it comes to details. So before I even gave it off to the editors, I sat there and I cataloged it all myself first. So MS, or CU of this and this action, take five, blah, blah, blah. So if a random person, if I died tomorrow, they could look at it and say, okay, I see where he's at. So I put location, I put the camera angle, I put the actual action, what we're doing, and then I put the number of takes. And so all the way through chronologically over the course of the 63 days, it was 52 days to climb Everest, but we spent 63 days in Nepal filming. All of that was sequenced, so that I could give the drives to editors. And so we had multiple editing teams. We had an editing team in Vegas. We had an editing team here in Denver. And those two teams were doing the editing of the 2D film. Now, the VR is a completely different beast. So our editing team for the VR side of things was in LA and in Louisiana. So completely separate team from the 2D team. And so I had to try to take all that footage, separate it out, and then manage it between those different parties for the two different productions in order to make the two different films that are part of the same combination series.
This just sounds like a monster. That's crazy. So, when you talk about this, the Quest 2D and virtual reality series, what does that
Mhm.
mean? What does that
So
mean
what we're
exactly?
doing is like I said, we had all the cameras in 2D that we're filming, and then what happened was I was originally planning on shooting this only in 2D, and then the idea came because I love first person shooters and video games and stuff, and so I'm like, you know what? Knowing that most of the world will never have a chance to climb the mountain or be dumb enough to try it, get off the couch and train for it, was all right. Why don't I film this thing in first person VR 360? And because, yeah, as you know, in 2D, as great as it is, if you're standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon and you're looking out over the Grand Canyon and you take a picture of it, I don't care what camera you take that picture with or take a video of it, you come back home and you're like, well, it doesn't really give me that depth of feel of how grandiose the Grand Canyon is and how deep the canyon is and how big and the mass of the rim is. The only way you're really going to get that is with the VR, because you get the 360 perspective where you can look around like this. You're looking down on my feet, down my shoulder, on the Hillary step, on the summit, in the icefall, in the crevasses, the trekking, the 9 days to base camp, and all that. You can only get that experience through VR. So I said, well, I'm already risking my life. I'm risking my house. I'm quitting my radio show to do this. I'm training 3 hours a day, 7 days a week to get myself ready for it and all this stuff. Why not do one more little step? Because I'm probably not going to go back again. So it's probably a one and done deal. Why not see if I can film this in VR as well? And that's how the VR component came in. And then once we knew that we could do this and we started getting the footage, I was like, well, now this needs to be an ongoing series where you can turn on Netflix or Apple TV or Amazon Prime and watch the Quest Everest 97-minute documentary in 2D. After you're done with that, if you're interested, go ahead and put your Meta headset on. Now watch it and experience it in 26 minutes in VR.
Okay, so it is just gonna be 2 projects, but you're calling the 2 of them a series.
Yeah, because what you have is you have the VR film itself is broken up into two different kind of films. You have a 26-minute long form version, depending on the use case scenario. So for people that want to watch it on their computer, you can still watch it on your phone, your computer, or whatever in 2D VR 360, like you see in YouTube VR, where you can use your mouse to scroll
Yeah,
around. So for
yeah.
people that will never put a headset on, which a lot of people won't, especially the older age demographic will never put on a VR headset. For those people that still want to know what it's like to look down the shoulder into a crevasse and pause it and look around and look into China and look down into India and all the stuff that you normally wouldn't be able to do in a 2D film because you're on rails being guided by the director, by the film, they can now do that. Or you can put on the headset and watch it in the most immersive form possible, or an immersive theater projection, 8K dome projection in a planetarium, whatever. Um, but we also then did it in 3 episodes. So episode 1 is the trek, the 9-day trek to base camp. Episode 2 is the climb, so the going up and down, the acclimatization and stuff that you need to do in order to try to make it to the summit. And then episode 3 is the summit itself. And that is mainly for the VR headset people, because most VR experiences, people only spend somewhere between 8 and 15 minutes under the headset before they take a break and then come back to it. So we wanted to get people to the structured aspect of these are the 3 episodes as it relates to climbing the Mount Everest over the course of 52 days. Episode 1, episode 2,
I
episode 3.
see.
Yeah. So
Ah,
you can experience it in different ways.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. Alright, so now let's talk about budget, because in my mind, I'm listening to you describe this whole experience of
Hmm.
training and then of preparing and then
Hmm.
of traveling, and then of all of the equipment, and then of all the days and the years. And I'm, trying to add up all of this in my head, and then I quit because it's just not possible. So what do you consider part of your film budget? Because certainly at some point you just decided not to consider some of it, or
I
the
did.
budget would be astronomical.
Yeah, because the opportunity cost and me not paying myself,
Right.
essentially is what it is. Since I was the host of this and the main producer of this as well, a lot of that stuff is cut out, right? So it's basically how much do I want to charge for, my services, my time, which I said, no, I have to honor this a childhood promise I was going to do anyway, since from the age of 14. So now what we're doing is killing two birds, one stone. I'm going to try to climb Mount Everest because I have to do that. I promised myself I would. And secondly, when I was sitting on the summit of Denali, I made that commitment. All right, I'm going to turn this into a series now. So that was like, all right, I'm going to do this as almost a proof of concept, because I knew if we could get the quest done on Everest and in Nepal, two of the most uncontrolled environments and difficult environments in the world to film in, then I know that I have a CV to say, all right, we can now go do the next one, because we have the next 4 or 5 locations lined up for the quest to shoot the next ones.
I
And if
see. I see.
Yeah, and so if we did it in 2D and VR and proved that it was possible, now all of a sudden it changes the game with regards to pre-production financing, having pre-production post-distribution and this kind of stuff lined up. Because the biggest thing that I had from pushback from people from Nat Geo and these other people that love the concept and the idea was, well, that all sounds great, Alex, but the chance of you pulling this off, because you've got to climb on Everest, which gives you a low success rate. You're hosting it, you're the actual on-camera personality that's hosting it, filming it, while you're trying to climb Everest, like we talked about earlier with cameras and so on, drops that success rate even lower. Yeah, we're not going to put our money into it, because why don't you talk to us when you get back? And talk to us when you have that 63 hours of footage. And now we can talk, because you've already taken all the risk. You've already put up all the money and risked your life and actually pulled it off by climbing to 29,032 feet and back, and came back with the footage.
I know.
So,
Such
so
chicken.
yeah, so it was a proof of concept in that respect. So all that budgetary cost was never even considered, because I didn't pay myself. And
Right.
I didn't even
So
put
what'd you include?
so it's about $300,000
Right.
that actually tangible money that came out. And so that was, the expedition cost, the camera, the gear, the editing, the post-production, the marketing, and so on, everything from that
Stuff you had
process
to
on.
pay people and stuff
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And those are just hard costs. There's no way around it. But I did the whole thing on basically on a come for myself, because again I knew that this was going to be an ongoing series anyway. So I already took all the risks, so it didn't really matter to me at that point.
Yeah, you kinda sound like me, still haven't paid myself, still hoping to,
Yeah,
we're pretty much at the place where we've broken even, but, still trying to figure out how to make this business model work, although it is, it's a business, and ultimately one day we're going to figure it out.
that's right. And it's an
But
evolving business too. That's the funny thing about it, right? I mean, it's changed so much.
oh my goodness,
Yeah,
every day I wake up
yeah,
and there's new
yeah,
news. There's an avalanche.
yeah.
I feel like it's an ice fall, that I'm climbing every day in this entertainment industry, and I
Yeah,
have to figure out what avalanche is hitting me next. So,
that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
I totally understand that. Well, we are talking because you have gotten distribution, and now this movie is released. So talk to us about that. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, Christian. Yeah, it's great. I mean, the good thing about it is that both films are out, and the variations are out, and now the world can actually see what all this labor of love is all about. And so, the simplest way to find either of these two productions is to just go to thequesteverest.com. There you can see the different links on where you can watch the 97-minute documentary on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Fandango, and so on, and also where you can watch the VR on Meta or Apple Vision Pro, Sony PlayStation 2, and all that other kind of stuff. So, yeah, if you just go to thequesteverest.com, you can get a whole litany of information, and you can see the links of where you can watch both of these productions. Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. And, we do have Joe Amadei and Tim Maggiani in common. They're the ones that introduced us. You were distributed
absolutely.
by Virgil Films Entertainment. So they are a terrific distribution company. We are both very happy and thankful for that team. So for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah. Well, it was a tremendous documentary. I did learn a lot. I commend you for the effort and the why behind what you did. I know you learned a lot. I hope you feel tremendously proud about what you did. And I wish you all the best success in the future. It's just incredibly amazing what you did. And I think it is going to be important work going forward with the other places you want to go. What's on your list?
I'll tell you, I can give you a little bit of a hint. The next one's going to be in Africa. So,
Oh, that sounds exciting and a
yeah.
lot warmer. I
It
hope it's
will be
warmer.
absolutely a lot warmer, completely different dynamic for sure. And again, like the quest itself, like you read off in the beginning, it's a documentary series, to take people on these educational thrill rides. So it's not necessarily about climbing mountains or any of that kind of stuff. It's more about telling these rarely seen stories, from some of these exotic places in the world that a lot of people won't have a chance to visit, and that hopefully I can bring to light with them in 2D and possibly virtual reality as well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, now we have come to everybody's favorite part of Documentary First, which is DOCUVIEW Deja Vu.
Yeah.
And what we'd like to do is ask you if you have a documentary to recommend to everybody here that's listening.
Well, it's funny because when I saw your email, Christian, I was like, well, the first thing that popped in my head, and as it relates to mountain climbing, mountaineering, and adventure, was Touching the Void, 2003 documentary. And, that was one of those films that stuck with me, especially over the course of my training, for these big mountains and my whole process to Everest, was because there's a lot of life lessons, survival lessons, and mountaineering skills and lessons in that film. And, it's about two guys essentially that go to the Andes to climb a peak that haven't been climbed. And it gets very dicey. That's all I want to say. But it's a very gripping story, very compelling story. And it's one that also relates, I guess, in a large degree to Mount Everest. So I can really kind of relate to it. But on the same token, it's one of those films that kind of got me going along this journey, along with all the other Everest content that I watched.
Oh, that's awesome. And do you know where we can watch that?
I think you could probably, that's a good question. I would guess Touching Void would still be on Amazon. If not, it might even be on YouTube now. Might have been picked up even by, people like Netflix or Disney and so on in their catalog, because it's been around now for 21 years or so.
Yeah.
But it's a heck of a movie,
Well, people can look it up on IMDb. That should tell you where it is.
I'll tell you exactly where it's at. That's right.
Well, the one I have to recommend, I actually just watched, I think 2 nights ago. And it was one that my sister Anne recommended. We watched it together, and it was Will and Harper. It was a fascinating documentary that Will Ferrell did about him and his best friend. They did a road trip together, and this road trip was basically for them to get reintroduced to one another. His best friend was a guy that he met during his time at SNL when they both first joined at the same time, and they became, very, very good friends. They got married, they had kids, they, stayed close on SNL. Some of his big roles came from this, I think his name was Andrew. And then Andrew's life changed, and he really went through this metamorphosis, let's say, and he wrote Will an email at one point and told him that he wanted to transition to be a female, and his name was Harper, or her name was Harper. And, Will needed to decide how to respond to Harper and what their new relationship was going to look like. And so Will proposed that they take a road trip together, and that's what this film is all about. So to me, it was fascinating. It was touching. It was educational. And I was very proud of Will for doing that. I learned a lot about a lot of things, actually. And I was super glad I watched it. I thought it was an incredible film, and I do encourage people to watch it. You can find it on Netflix. And, it'll be interesting. I think it'll challenge everybody's way of thinking about a lot of things. So, yeah, I encourage people to watch it. All right. Well, that is it for today's Documentary First. We really do appreciate you listening to our podcast. And, we truly believe that everybody has a story to tell, and that you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.